Analyzing and verifying non-self. Analyzing and verifying no-self in person belongs to the wisdom of learning and contemplating non-self. First, we need to develop a firm understanding. To do that, we should listen to the teachings. How can we verify non-self through analysis? We must examine ourselves. Does a real self exist within our body and mind? Observe the body, mental activities, and the six sense faculties: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Apart from them, is there a truly existent self? Observe and analyze carefully. Look inward and search. If there is no self who transmigrates from past lives to this life, as taught in the Buddhist concept of reincarnation, who undergoes rebirth? After death, what transmigrates to the next life? When karma accumulates and ripens, who experiences the results? The answer is, on the conventional or relative level, there is a self with innate ignorance. Thus, it undergoes countless reincarnations, accumulates karma, and experiences karmic consequences. In Buddhism, we conventionally establish a self as the basis that connects past and future lives and serves as the foundation of karma. However, the one who undergoes these experiences, the self, is just a label constructed on the relative and conventional level. On the relative level, we use terms like I or person in everyday language. But when we apply deeper analysis through wisdom, we find that, in the ultimate dimension, the self doesn't exist. It's nothing more than a wrong clinging, a deluded thought. For example, television is just a name. Is there a television set that truly exists? Is there really something called television inside the device? No. It's just a name. Similarly, ordinary beings label the subject as I to differentiate themselves from others. But like any name we give to an object, the I is just a notion, a wrong clinging. When we say I, it's just like calling something by a name. At the conventional level, the self is made up of 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The aggregate of form refers to the physical body, while the other 4 aggregates relate to the mind. Aggregate means a combination or collection. When we fall ill, we regard the body as I. We don't say, my body is sick, or my physical body is malfunctioning. Instead, we say, I am sick. We say, the car stops working. But we usually don't say, the body fails to work properly, or a component is blocked or has run into problems. This is because we regard the body as I. When some part of our body hurts, or when we feel happy for having health, wealth, or peace, we regard feeling as I. We say, I am happy, I am joyful, I am full, or I am hungry. We might say, my stomach is growling, but we generally don't say, my feeling is happy. In this context, the I refers only to a feeling. What we call happiness is merely an illusory feeling. One day, I explained to a lay practitioner why beings in the form realm experience bliss. After entering meditative absorption, their physical body transforms, and both body and mind become deeply relaxed. Thus, they experience immense pleasure, similar to the effects of taking drugs. This explanation confirmed one of his own experiences. He shared that once he fainted. When he regained consciousness, he felt his body and mind completely relaxed, without any deluded thoughts, and experienced bliss. Perhaps when he fainted, it was similar to entering the concentration of the form realm. He felt very comfortable and blissful. From then on, he was no longer drawn to worldly pleasures. Similarly, if you fall asleep peacefully, without wandering thoughts, you will feel very comfortable when you wake up. However, for those who haven't grasped the techniques of sleep, when they close their eyes, they start pondering wildly. Why do people age? Those who cannot rest their brains age faster. Those who sleep well have fewer wandering thoughts and slower mental activity after falling asleep. Many of us here age slowly because our minds are stable, with fewer afflictions and slower or less frequent mental activity. Notably, people with fewer dreams tend to age more slowly. However, most people don't even remember their dreams. Many individuals dream throughout the night, which results in poor sleep quality. Those who don't dream while sleeping only need 2 to 3 hours of sleep per day. In reality, we spend most of our sleep time dreaming. When we say we need 6, 7, or 8 hours of sleep, it's just a habit. We spend most of that time dreaming, which is very exhausting. When we say I am happy, we regard this feeling as I. What we call happiness is merely a sense of satisfaction that arises when our desires are fulfilled. When we get what we want, we think, how happy I am. When we experience mental distress and feel depressed, we regard consciousness as I. The distressed consciousness is not I, but merely a mental sensation that arises and ceases. When we engage in activities, we regard actions as I. We say, I'm going to do something, or I want to eat. The subject is always I, which reinforces self-grasping. We should understand that the doer is the aggregate of mental formations. When karma functions, the mind discriminates, giving rise to desire, aversion, and delusion. Then, one commits evil deeds like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying, or performs the 10 virtuous actions. The doer of these actions is the aggregate of mental formations. It is not I that acts. It is the aggregate of mental formations that performs actions and creates karma. When we think, we regard the thinking process as I. On the ultimate level, non-self means that the 5 aggregates that constitute the self lack inherent nature. Inherent nature refers to a characteristic that an object intrinsically possesses, is independent of external conditions, and doesn't change. Inherent nature is a very important concept. It is an intrinsic, unchanging characteristic. Inherent nature has 3 characteristics. It does not depend on any causes or conditions. It is eternal. It is singular and indivisible. Once we recognize that the self is merely a concept, a combination of the 5 aggregates, we realize that it has no inherent nature. Since it is devoid of inherent nature, there is no self. A self without intrinsic nature is only a concept. What we call a television is just a name without any inherent existence. Likewise, there is no real self. Let's analyze why the 5 aggregates are devoid of inherent nature. What we call the self is merely the combination of the 5 aggregates. Apart from these 5 aggregates, no separate self can be found. 1. The aggregate of form. Our body consists of numerous components, including 32 teeth, 21,000 hairs, 360 bones, heart, internal organs, muscles, fat, skin, blood, saliva, bile, pus, and more. It also contains cell fluids. In modern scientific terms, there are cells. Different organs are made up of different cells. Additionally, there is bodily heat, the fire element, and breath, the wind element. Each component is a divisible, fragmentary phenomenon composed of hundreds of millions of cells. This fact contradicts the singular, indivisible characteristic of inherent nature. Scientists state that the human body consists of around 10 trillion cells. Each cell contains water, and there is fluid between the cells. Together, they form the physical body. Every component, cell, and organ is impermanent. They arise, change, and cease from moment to moment. Metabolism occurs within cells, motion occurs in molecules, and the inside of each atom is also impermanent. Molecules are composed of atoms, within which electrons orbit at high speeds. Furthermore, there are even tinier particles, like protons arising, vibrating, and ceasing from moment to moment. In reality, all phenomena arise in one place and pass away in another, though they may appear close to each other. Today's science is interesting. Through studying and meditating on impermanence, we know that the moment a phenomenon arises, it ceases. The next moment, it arises and ceases at another space-time point. When we speak of walking from here to there, we are not actually moving there. Instead, we are arising and ceasing, arising in one location in this instant, then arising elsewhere in the next. Due to a force, it arises and ceases at one space-time point, and in the following instant, it arises at another. Space and time are constantly changing. Since it arises and ceases here in one moment, then arises and ceases elsewhere in the next, its movement doesn't necessarily take time. Scientists have discovered that an object that arises and ceases at one space-time point in this instant may arise and pass away on another planet in the next instant. The movement doesn't take time, and the object doesn't need to travel there. What people perceive as spatial distance doesn't actually exist. If it can arise in a nearby location, it can also arise 10,000 or even countless miles away. There is no real object in the world. The moment an object arises, it instantly ceases. Then, it arises and ceases at another space-time point, whether 1 millimeter, 1 centimeter, 10 kilometers, or 10,000 kilometers apart, all are possible. This is a discovery of modern science. For example, we are 10 trillion Buddha fields away from the pure land of ultimate bliss. But if you traveled 10 trillion Buddha fields to reach there, I would have already attained Buddhahood. Even if your consciousness were to fly there at light speed, by the time you arrived, I would have already achieved enlightenment right here. In reality, it doesn't take time to get there. Sometimes, when consciousness ceases here, it directly arises there. For consciousness, space doesn't exist. 1 millimeter and 10,000 kilometers are the same. Science can prove that there's no difference between 1 millimeter and 10,000 kilometers. This is not easy to comprehend. Space and time are an illusion, a relative thing. The Buddhist view of time and space is insightful, while scientists' understanding remains quite primitive. Since the emergence of quantum mechanics, science has begun to approximate the Buddhist view of time and space, but it is still far from it. They have just started to approach the Buddhist perspective. The authentic Mahayana Buddhist view of time and space is fascinating. Every component of the body is impermanent, arising, changing, and ceasing in every moment. Within a single moment, arising and ceasing occur simultaneously. It's not that something arises in one moment and ceases in another. In fact, it passes away in the very moment it arises. The arising and ceasing of a continuum of similar items easily leads us to perceive things as having an inherent nature. The physical body, too, is a continuity of similar items. Though it is changing in every instant, the changes are minute. Though we are aging, we perceive little noticeable change over a day or even years. In reality, we undergo tremendous changes every day. The physical body is a new entity in each moment, yet we always perceive it as the same. Recognizing the selflessness of the mind is even more challenging because sensations, such as pain, can continue for a long time. Gradually, the pain subsides. The same pattern applies to pleasant sensations. Compared to the body, which seems solid over the long term, sensations are relatively fleeting. However, they recur in fixed patterns. For instance, being burned by fire or pricked by a needle causes pain, and illness brings discomfort. Hence, we think the self seems to exist. Once stimulated, the aggregate of feelings arises. It is also a continuum of similar items. It's not easy to see through the arising and ceasing of this continuity. We should strive to recognize that though sensations appear similar, they are not the same one. They arise and cease moment by moment. They are devoid of inherent nature. They are impermanent. Since they are impermanent, they lack inherent nature. Since they are not singular but are changing, they have no intrinsic nature. Anything with an intrinsic nature would never change. If it changes, what it will become is uncertain. As it is constantly changing, it will eventually fade away. This is how they change. All phenomena ultimately come to an end. Therefore, nothing truly exists. Were anything truly existent, it would not cease. All phenomena, whether the physical body or the other four aggregates, ultimately cease. This proves they lack inherent existence. Were they truly existent, they wouldn't end up like that. Truly existent things would last forever. The five aggregates are like flowers in the sky, suddenly appearing and disappearing due to karma. This fact contradicts the unchanging nature of inherent existence. Inherent nature is permanent and unchanging. Only constant entities have an inherent nature. However, all phenomena are impermanent, arising and ceasing moment by moment. Of course, the aggregation of numerous components, too, lacks intrinsic nature. Every component, cell, molecule, and atom arises and ceases moment by moment. Hence, it's apparent that their combination, the body, is momentary. Furthermore, the physical body, from birth and life to aging and death, is determined by causes and conditions. It arises, abides, and dies according to the corresponding causes and conditions. Without the necessary causes and conditions, the body wouldn't exist. Hence, the body depends on causes and conditions without inherent control. This fact contradicts the characteristic of inherent nature, not relying on any causes and conditions. Therefore, the existence of the body depends on the combination of causes and conditions. It has no power to determine its own destiny